right, let's get started. That's an amazing point of view from here, because I was spending the whole day at the back side of the room just watching the other perspective, and I hope you still have some energy, not totally tired, had enough coffee, because we're going to talk about scaling Drupal, or how Drupal can scale in large organizations. This will be a less technical call. Yeah? We will talk about which gap Drupal is filling in these organizations. I think we had splendid talks already today, which already touched on this topic, so let's see how this fits in. My name is Rouven. I'm working in this IT industry since over 20 years, and about 15, 16 years ago, I specialized on Drupal. You can find me on Drupal.org and LinkedIn, of course, and I'm working since 1 year with 1x Internet. But over the course of the last basically 16 years, I worked with a handful of international brands very closely, and most of them were actually using Drupal. So there are some insights I would like to share with you and tell you more about why these organizations decide for Drupal and how it fits into their digital strategy. So when we move forward, I would likely touch on the agenda. So we will quickly set the scene. Then we will look into the economies of scaling, smart deployments and hosting, especially with hundreds of sites. Then we will talk about compliance and sustainability, and then a quick wrap up. So I don't want to stress this too much because I think we are all exhausted and we are looking forward to the social event tonight, aren't we? So change is dangerous. When we work at large organizations, they are afraid of change, especially if the change is not controlled. Right? We want to change in a meaningful manner. And so we have to realize that when we change, that this is the essence of life. If we stop changing, we will probably go over time. Right? So if we have to change, and if this is a natural part of growing an organization over time, then we have to make sure it's sustainable, that we do it in a meaningful way, because change is coming anyway. And one of the things we have to realize is technology is evolving faster than anybody could keep up with. So we need to find a way how we can foster knowledge and keep on growing and moving along. So when we go to Drupal.org, we can find that about 71% of the universities, the top 100 universities in the world, already rely on Drupal as a system. So why is that? I hope that we can learn about this more together today here together. Also, our host here, the University of Edinburgh, is using Drupal, which is great, right? But when we take a step back, it's not only the universities which rely on it, or the governments, as we have seen in the talk before. We have this amazing Gartner chart, which is published every year, and big sales organizations like Acquia heavily rely on that to promote Drupal. But it's Acquia here on the chart and not Drupal. So the visibility of Drupal is kind of a hidden champion. So how are all these organizations we have seen on the first slide been able to identify this as a tool for them and utilize this? So it's a lot about the economies of scale. And to understand these challenges, we need to keep in mind that these organizations are using Drupal in a different way. They don't think in individual installations anymore. They have been there. They probably replaced their systems multiple times. When the website was not good enough, they changed to the next bigger system. But at one point, you realize that you cannot use individual installations. You need something which is reusable. And that's one of the core strengths we have in the Drupal ecospace, which is natively built in because of the way how the Drupal community is working. And a common pattern we can see here, and excuse me, I used the euro sign here. I know you prefer the pound, but I hope this is fine. You still get the message. We have this free core, the things which are coming from the Drupal community. Yeah? And these organizations start building their own master code bases. And they can start reusing this. So what they do is they create this inner onion layer and adding all the modules and configurations they need for compliance, for their purposes, so that when it comes to the individual site, it's just the outer layer. It's quite easy to create new sites and build on existing proven code bases. And 20% is just an example. We have some organizations which run thousands of sites on the same master code base. And there you will see a big impact when it comes to things like total cost of ownership. Yeah. But as a general rule of thumb, we would like to apply this 80-20% rule. If you need a new site, just take something which has proven standards, which is compliant with your needs, with your market, with your organization, and fulfills this purpose. And there are not many systems which can do that. You can build your own stuff, maybe starting with an application framework, or you can take an existing CMS solution, but CMSs also have the constraint that they have a single purpose. Drupal is more like this digital innovation framework. It can be a CMS, but it can be anything else you want to. And when we check events like the Splash Awards, we can see many beautiful cases where Drupal is used beyond the CMS use case. So it's quite powerful for these organizations. What would be a corporate talk about a slide with a lot of text? So I brought a couple of tips here with me, so we don't need to go through them in detail. But I just want to make sure that we have listed these points. And you will see this throughout the presentation, that there are a couple of lists which are relevant, because large-scale projects, they're a big challenge. There are many dependencies. So we need to understand how technology can help us to scale. And one of the reasons why Drupal is such a good fit, as we have seen in the earlier slide, is that we have the central component which we can maintain centrally. So we can avoid redundant work. We don't need to take an installation and maintain it for each single instance of our sites. It also allows us to automate and integrate a lot of stuff with the DevOps procedures, which have been established over the last couple of decades. Right? 20 years ago, no one was talking about DevOps, and everyone was still pushing code via FTP to some servers. Nowadays, we can fully automate this. So this is a game changer. And when we think about so many sites and traditional CMS installations which require a license where you have to pay for, it becomes obvious that as soon as you have, like, let's say 100 sites, you need to pay individual license for each one of those, it doesn't scale well. So this makes open source very attractive, and Drupal fits well into this niche. And as I said, some of these organizations on the list earlier, they have thousands of sites. So let's make sure that we don't waste money, because now it's all about efficiency, having central processes which we can repeat, which work reliably. Other components like a design system become important. We want to have brand consistency and reusable components. Especially with Drupal, we have plenty of out-of-the-box systems we can use, which have been proven and established. The central governance part becomes really important, so we'll look into this later on when it comes to the topic compliance. But here are two more things I would like to highlight. When you provide an application at scale with a small team, when you manage to do this, you will have hundreds of users relying on your work. So it becomes really essential that you have good user manuals and onboarding tools in place. And there's one of these hidden gems in Drupal, which is called the tours module. And this becomes increasingly important that when you have a new user, you just turn on the tour and it will guide the user through the system. Use it. It's awesome. And last but not least, integration is king. And integration is not limited to like single sign-on of your users or integrating a digital asset management system or other typical corporate systems we have in place. We can also think about Drupal as a content repository, which we can use across different websites so that we can centralize our editorial workflows. So there are plenty of arguments which are very compelling for these organizations, and they implement it in a very different way, but what they have in common is the core system. And this is made for change, and I love this. So let's think about deployments and hosting for a moment. So I think, Billy, you mentioned earlier, you're running on Pantheon. There are a couple of different platforms available, right? We have heard about Acquia, Platform as Age, and so on. There are also many organizations running their own stack in their own data centers. And this is also something we need to keep in mind. Here's a statement from Forrester in the year 2015, where we relaunched Drupal and launched Drupal 8, basically with a new architecture. Back in the days, they already had an average of 268 sites per organization. Just think about the overhead and management. And now they have this tool. So nearly 10 years later, we have plenty of websites. And I was thinking about how can I present this when we have hundreds of installations with different purposes. And in the end, I just chose to use bubbles and use your imagination. Because all of these installations, they need to maintain code, files, database, users, and many things which are related to the operation of one site. We have domains, infrastructure. How can we manage this with a small team? And the answer to that is obviously DevOps, right? If you need Drupal at scale, you need to have a good DevOps team, or at least a strong partner which knows how to do that. What's also fascinating is each large organization, they have their own tools. Some use Microsoft, some use Atlassian, but the Drupal standard is GitLab. We have plenty of established, proven procedures available in GitLab on Drupal.org, and we can easily use this to extend this into the organization, so we don't need to reinvent the wheel. And so you save a lot of overhead if you just stick to the tools the Drupal communities are already providing. The use of command line tools is, for DevOps people, a no-brainer. Some people don't really like that. They would prefer to have this in the user interface, but at scale, there's no way around that. And we have pretty strong tools. Git, the industry standard, but Composer, Drush, we're able to run and fully automate deployments. So this is quite powerful. And it's still a challenge for many CMSs out there. Because when you run updates, they have sometimes an impact on the database, so you need to run updates which are modifying stuff, so you probably need the maintenance mode. But most of the updates which we are deploying can be rolled out like on the fly without putting the site into maintenance. Okay, so what else do we need? We need governance, right? As the team which is operating this thing, we need to have central monitoring and log file aggregation. I don't have the time to go to individual sites. I need to have this in one dashboard, centrally aggregated. So if we get this, also other aspects of operating the site become kind of trivial, right? There is this old tradition of having high availability solutions. And we know probably these architectures with multiple front-end servers, load balancing, and so on. But when we think about the industry standards with CDNs, it's not that important anymore for sites which just provide information. Even if your front-end server dies and there's a problem with the site or it's in maintenance mode, the CDN can cover most of the traffic already. So we can be very cautious when we decide for the cost of operation of the infrastructure by identifying the purpose of the individual site. Some companies lose money when the website is down, so please invest into good high availability. But if it's just a local small site and there's no pain if it goes down, you can make the decision just to have this simple approach. So there are a couple of other things like automated updates, but I think we all know that, right? We are here at the Drupal event, so we know how this goes. So let's proceed into the next chapter. And this is the compliance challenge. And compliance is a big topic nowadays. We're not only talking about IT security or data privacy, we're talking also about accessibility. And in large organizations, oftentimes about like local requirements, not only here in UK or Europe, but across the world, and they might be very different. So let's take this pyramid as an example, because once we have established the central team which is maintaining our master code base, they are basically the tip of the spear, leading the direction. They will provide the tooling for all the different business owners. And there are plenty of tools, and as I said, I don't want to go into detail of all of them. I will share the slides later. But there are many established tools which make our daily life as developers easier. Developers, not only developers, also designers, right? If you have a design system, the site owners, project management, there's plenty of stuff we can use out of the box. There are descriptions available. When it comes to the release process, it's about rolling out the central changes to hundreds of sites. So DevOps is a broad term, but DevOps allows us to do this in parallel, right? As soon as a security update appears, we can fully automate this stuff and roll it out to being able to respond to these things in minutes or hours. Back in the days, we had once per month a security update day, yeah, because someone had to go on the machine and patch something. This is not sustainable anymore because hackers and attackers for these sites, they are so advanced that a few hours after releasing a security update, they already start having automated scripts looking for vulnerabilities, which makes it so important to have also a good hosting provider, which is part of the initiative in the Drupal Association, where they proactively configure the firewalls to protect you from that. Right? This is a strong benefit also the security team we have in the community is a strong benefit. So when it comes to production, and this is probably the biggest challenge for most organizations, we need to establish things like workflows and editorial constraints that the many site owners we cannot individually guide through the process cannot do any harm, right? Especially with things as accessibility in mind or SEO optimization, AI-generated content. We have seen this today. It becomes essential that we add some governance on this level as well. So it's not only about coding standards and deploying stuff anymore. So make sure that you establish a best practice of regular audits and scans, right? Check the website, monitor what they're doing, because you cannot be everywhere with a small team like that. All right, so let's move to the next slide. I promised you more text. There it is. I mentioned most of the stuff already on the slide before, so this is primarily for documentation. But there are some simple tricks I would like to highlight. Nowadays, websites embed a lot of third-party code. So we all have seen these cookie banners. Do I consent? Yes, no, maybe. Selling my soul? Check. There's a challenge. I remember like 10 years ago, editors were able to add HTML directly into the content if they had the permission. This is so dangerous from a GDPR perspective nowadays, because if they can just embed an iframe or JavaScript or whatsoever, this will be against the regulations. I'm not allowed to do that. And as a large organization, I need to prevent this because the risk of receiving one of these, how's it called, the letters from the lawyers, deceased or resist letters, I don't know, has been a long day. But you have challenges, and there is a lot happening on the market, and people will sue you if you don't do it right. So the risk of fines or other implications resulting out of this is huge. So you want to make sure that you do it right, and so make sure that if you have editors which are capable of doing stuff, that they cannot hack the site or extend it with custom technologies which are not part of your cookie content management, as well not part of this content security policy. Another thing I would like to touch is the sanitization. We know data privacy is important, and we probably also know that we can encrypt data in transit and at rest. But when it comes to data in dev teams, we have seen many times that people just go to the production system, copy the database locally, take the notebook, travel back home, and they lose it somewhere. Someone finds the notebook, and the live production database has been on the notebook. Bad thing. Where did I see it? Not at 1x Internet, so don't worry. But it happened in the past. There are incidents like that data is lost. So Drupal has this nice sanitization feature. You can automate your platform when you download the dump, the data will be sanitized. That's awesome. This is what you need. You need to implement these safety measures to make sure that nothing is leaked accidentally, right? We could go deeper into things like data lifecycle management, but this would be too much, and it's not Drupal anymore. This is a thing which all organizations and all technologies need to comply with. So let's think about sustainable solutions, and we remember the slide in the beginning, right? Change is coming anyway. So how can I establish a team and a system which helps me to grow over the next coming of years? And thanks to the new release cycle of Drupal, we can implement this continuous innovation. It's not like doing a migration every 5 years anymore. We can have like every year or every 2 years these Drupal upgrades with minimal efforts, and we don't need to migrate all the big things anymore. So let's think about that. And Janne put it really nicely a couple of years ago at the Drupal business event in Frankfurt. He said, technology helps you to save money. That is obviously why you have to invest in it. And I really love this quote, because he hit the nail on the head. And most organizations understand this nowadays, but it's an ongoing investment. It's not like a one-time off project and then you have a solution and it will work for the next couple of years. No, it's a thing you need to maintain. You need to proceed. Just imagine you would own an airline, you buy one of these nice Airbuses here, and you start flying from Scotland, Edinburgh to Frankfurt. Every day your passengers are happy. But if you don't maintain this machine anymore, right? If you don't keep it up to date, it will not comply with the regulations out there. but probably also your passengers will start worrying about their safety. So keep this in mind as an example. Technology is important to be maintained and continuously invested in. And when we talk about Drupal, it's not the solution. It's just a tool for us. And I also like the analogy with the Swiss Army knife. Because when organizations start looking for a product to solve their CMS needs, they go probably to a market, check the boxes. Does it comply with my requirements? Looks good. Yes, I take it. Thank you. Drupal is different. And you cannot find Drupal at a media market or somewhere else at the grocery stores. Right? Drupal is more like the Swiss Army knife as an end product, but we build it. So we can decide which tools the customer actually needs. We assemble it. If you would like to have like a red shell on it, perfect. If it should be blue, we can do it as well. Right? So we build the solution with Drupal, and this is why it's so hard to compete in a regular sales process with it. But once the organization understands this, the doors are open. So this is my third slide with a lot of text. I already covered most of this stuff. There's one important detail in the center, and this is front ends come and go. Right? This is where innovation happens, the customer touch point. But the users and the content will grow with the organization over time. So we can take this out. And as users, we're already used to that. We integrate CRM solutions, single sign-on, whatsoever. We have a CRM system connected to all our websites because we don't want to have the user data in the individual CMS installations. It doesn't make sense. But the same applies for content. We have a digital asset management system, which is a form of content, but also text content. So think about solutions where you can reuse content and share it across your sites. It can drastically simplify your processes and also the cost of operation and the cost with your editors. Performance also becomes pretty important because if your site is performing poorly, it will probably cause a lot of cost. And this also has a negative impact on your CO2 footprint, which is increasingly important for these organizations. But when we think about performance, and we are able to improve the overall site performance by only 10%, and multiply this with 1,000 sites, you can imagine what this means for the total cost of ownership. This saves cost, and this allows you to have more innovation and free up space for other stuff. One final thought here is the center of excellence. All these organizations need to have a central team which is guiding and steering the development of the central, like the master code base. And this allows the individual site owners in the outer shell of the Drupal onion to decide what they want to have. But they just basically get a tool set, and if they have a great idea, you can evaluate this together with them. Use feature flags, add it to the code base, but don't make it available to all sites. Evaluate it in a small scope, and as soon as it's approved by everyone, roll it out to the rest. Since everything is in the central code base, you can do that. And nobody is preventing you from having a central code base and hundreds of installations. So it's not important if you take a Drupal multi-site with running multiple sites on only one server, or hundreds of individual installations. This is like totally flexible. So long story short, fit the solution to the organization and don't force the organization to fit into the solution. And this is the main difference to existing license-based products out there. Because if you buy in Adobe, if you buy into SAP or whatsoever, the organization needs to adapt because there's a product which is configured in a way that's best for all customers and not individually for you. And this is why I love talking about Drupal with these organizations. So let's come to a wrap up, because I can sense most of you are tired. I am at least. So I had brought a picture. You might have recognized the first picture. It was a satellite image of Scotland. Who recognized this? Hands up. Ah, nice. The experts. But this picture here is 55 years old. And I'm curious if anybody here in the room knows how many contributors have been involved in the first step on the moon. Guesses? 10,000? Hundreds of thousands, okay. Any other guesses? All right. Back in the days, there were about 400,000 contributors. This is amazing, isn't it? 400,000 people contributed that one man can put a first step on the moon. And I wouldn't stand here and talk about large organizations without all the contributors out in the world, right? Without you. We are a big community. And the innovative powerness which arises out of this community is so important and so powerful that big brands buy into it. And I think it's about time that we teach these organizations also to contribute back, right? So it's a synergy we need to work on, we need all to work on. So when we wrap up and think about change and how difficult and dangerous change is, we can see that there are hundreds of contributors. And every day there are updates in our Drupal ecospace, and we can use Composer to continuously stay up to date. But for these organizations, it's awesome to have a tool which has this in its DNA, right? We have all the tools and methodology already there, which allows us to have millions of contributors contributing into one single website or code base, which allows us to run hundreds again. So in the end, for these organizations, most importantly, it's about total cost of ownership and return of investment, right? And this is a tricky calculation. I will not start boring you with that one, but it usually pays off quickly. Some of them have an ROI already after 1 year or after a few years, and it's a long-term investment, right? They go into a journey which will be able to grow with the organization. And they go out of this relaunch prison every 5 years, selecting another technology. So that's my talk. Thank you for your attention. I hope you liked it. And now we can do some Q&A if we have time left.
Press the wrong button again.
All good.
Questions for Rouven?
All right. Brilliant. Thank you.